For those of you that chimed into the episode about effort, we talked about being on the clock and what it looks like to be on the clock. And that's what we're going to talk about on this episode. So listen in because you just might be on the damn clock.
You might be on the clock.
Welcome back to another episode with Dub and Trey. Today, as you heard before, we're going to talk about being on the clock. But first, we're going to explain what it means to be on the clock. So if you're ever in a situation and, and this is about man to woman, woman to man, woman to woman, it don't matter who you're dealing with. We all at some point have either been on the clock or we put somebody on the clock where that person has changed. They're doing things. They're doing little passive aggressive things. And just some stuff is happening around you that you may or may not be paying attention to clue you into things that either they ready to leave you alone or or they tired of you maybe not coming through on your side of the deal when it comes to the relationship. Right. So we're going to talk about some of those things and what they look like. And again, I don't think these are things that are just in particular to just men or just women, because I think both of us do some of the things that we're probably going to talk about. So, so this should be a pretty good fun episode. So, I'll let you go first, man. What you got is one of your signs that you just might be on the clock.
Well, one of my signs that I have that you definitely need to pay attention to, that you when you know that you're being on the clock, is when you let somebody know that you're going to call them back and they call you back. You're definitely being micromanaged on some level, but that's one of the quick things that you can, you might want to have a conversation with that person, because again, they could be getting a little antsy. They could be thinking about spending time with you, or they want to check back with you. So you're definitely on the clock, because this person, whether man or woman, they want to find out what it is you're doing. If you say, hey, I'm going to call you back, I'm in the middle of something, I'll get back with you, and they call you back 20, 30 minutes later, that's a sign that you may be on the clock. And there's a deeper conversation that needs to be had when it comes to those type of things. That's one thing I got, Dub. Another thing also, I think, is another sign where conversation needs to be had, and to let you know that you may be on the clock, is when people question your whereabouts, your time, in a subliminal way, not just blatantly coming at you saying, hey, where were you?
Right.
They just say, hey, how was your day? What'd you do today? This, that, or the other. And sometimes that could be a genuine thing, but if this person already had already understands what it is you do, they know what your day looks like, but they're trying to really micromanage your time in a real condescending, non-combative way. It's very I'm trying to think of the word I want to use.
Passive aggressive. It's very passive aggressive.
Yeah. What you got, Doug?
So what I'm thinking about with this is signs, being on the clock of they about to get rid of your ass. Like you right on the verge of like you on the clock about to be traded. You know what I'm saying? So some signs that you about to be on a trading block and somebody about to change teams, whether you about to change teams or your person you with about to change teams. So that's the perspective I'm coming from with being on the clock. So one of the things I got with that one is you might be on the clock if the attention changes in your relationship where they don't pay attention to you as much as they used to anymore. Right? Just little things that they don't really care anymore. In your example, they kind of micromanaging you, but then on the opposite side of that is they don't care anymore. They don't call. They don't care where you go. They don't care what time you come in. They just, you just doing you and they let you do you. That might be a sign that you might be about to be traded to a new team.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah, a person not caring about whatever they don't matter. It doesn't matter what you're doing. They don't care because they've already moved on.
That's right.
Yeah, that's big. That's big.
Another one I got is when people are no longer invested in arguing with you anymore. You know, sometimes in relationships, when you care, you get into those conversations that you care about the relationship, about the disrespect, about, hey, I didn't like when you did this. Maybe we talking about our future, whatever it is, things we disagree on. The person is no longer interested in having those conversations. They just sort of let you talk and they just look at you and they don't care to respond anymore.
Yeah. That's a good point. I'm going to swing it back to the side I was on, right?
All right.
So I talked about the micromanaging, and I also talked about people being passive aggressive with their time.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, I'm going to speak from a man's perspective on this one. A lot of times, a woman has a clock and they are constantly putting men on a particular type of schedule, whether they want to be married, whether they want to have children, whether they want to be in a relationship, how long they want to be in a relationship, how long they want to be living with a person before they're supposed to get married or have kids. There's so many different clocks that women have that men pay no attention to. So the first part of this, I want people to understand, especially men, you need to understand those clocks. That's number one. And two, ladies, sometimes you need to not apply the clock to the wrong person. Sometimes put the clock on the wrong person and you say, okay, I need to have a child before I'm 35. And you end up having a child, and then you realize this isn't the person that you should have been having a child with.
Right.
Same concept goes when you're talking about marriage. Same thing goes when you're talking about moving in with somebody. So my point to say to all of this is that sometimes it's okay to waste your time. The reason why I say it's okay to waste your time is because you could go into something that you can't get out of. It's okay to deal with somebody just to see where that may go. And if it doesn't go anywhere, it's okay. At least you didn't go in and get married, or at least you didn't go in and have a child.
Right.
What I'm telling people is, and what I'm telling ladies are, sometimes it's okay not to have that clock, not to say, hey, you're on the clock because this is what I'm trying to do. Because you miss some of the key characteristics, you find out that this isn't the person that's good for you. The person finds out that you're not good for them. And you've ended up putting yourself on this schedule. And at the end of it, nobody's happy and everybody is miserable. And a lot of times you have divorce, you have, children that come out of these things because somebody wanted to be on the clock because of their peers, because of how they were raised, a lot of other reasons. But I want people to understand that the clock is not there for you just to have and to apply it to just any old body. And guess what? Sometimes the clock just may not be for you. A child or a marriage or a relationship may not be for you, whatever the situation may be. So, and from the fella's perspective, understand what you get into when you're dealing with somebody who has you on a clock. When you meet a woman and she says she wants to have a child by a certain time frame, and if you're dealing with her, guess what? Understand that your actions you're going to have to be responsible for because she wants these things at a certain time frame, and a lot of times that may happen with or without you.
Right.
So please be mindful of that, but understand that these clocks aren't very good sometimes when you're dealing with the wrong people.
Right. And I think about from that perspective, being on the clock is, I think those kind of clocks come from selfishness and thinking about yourself.
Yeah.
Right. I think when a person in general plans out their entire life based on time, by this age, I want this. By that age, I want that. By the next age, I want this. Now,
Right.
if these are things that you can do by yourself, that's cool, right? You can do all of that. If you say, I wanna have this degree by this time, I want to have my master's by this time, I want to have my doctorate by this time, then I want to have my PhD by like that's a clock you can put yourself on and sort of stick to that. But what I think you're alluding to, Trey, is when your clock includes some other person that you have no control of, you cannot have a clock and include other people in your clock because it just doesn't work out. And you have to understand that your clock is coming from a place of selfishness because you put yourself on a clock and now you're looking for someone to abide by the rule and the time that you've set for yourself. And and by doing that, you put yourself in a situation because you're more worried about this self-inflicted clock than you're worried about the person who is even worthy of the things that you want, like a kid or marriage or whatever it is. So y'all really need to ask yourself, for those of you that have that kind of clock, why do you have it? What is it that's making you say, I want to be married by the time I'm 30? Or I want to have my kid by the time I'm this age, and by the time I get another age, it's too late for me to have kids.
Why is that so important?
Right? Why do you where's that coming from?
Yeah. And then understand that you put pressure on the person that you're dealing with when you talk about those particular clocks. And you end up either pushing this person away, or this person may even make an effort to try to do it, and then it may blow up in his face or her face, because it can go both ways. And then you're like, why did I even get myself into this situation? Where you have somebody who's saying, well, I want to be in a relationship. And then you have somebody else, I'm going to use the guys as an example. You have a guy saying, well, I really don't want to be in a relationship. So then months down the line, the woman is saying, hey, are we gonna become monogamous and be in a relationship? Are we gonna, take this a step forward? And he says, well, I'm not really ready for that. So she either deals with it or she doesn't deal with it. But the point of this is to really understand that, like you said, it's a selfish act to have a clock and put that onto someone else, because sometimes it may work out great, and sometimes these things may work out wrong. Now, don't get me wrong. I am not saying to sit around for 5, 6, 10 years and just not be productive in your relationship or productive in whatever it is that you do. I'm just saying that when you put your own timetable onto someone else, it's not necessarily going to work out the way you want it to work out, because that person may have their own timetable. So then I pose this question to everybody, and even to you, Doug. If two people have two different timetables, my assumption would be that they will come together and have a conversation about it and have an agreement on what the clock would be. But even still, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to happen. Yeah. Just because I say something today doesn't mean it's what it is tomorrow. I may say that this is my goal today, and I may wake up 6 months from now and say, you know what, I changed my mind. I don't want that. Right. People are very finicky that way. They can do that. They have the right to do it if they choose to, but you just got to be transparent about it.
Yeah. So with that one, man, I honestly don't think many people are having that exact conversation. I honestly think what happens is people manipulate their actions so that their internal clock, whatever they set, happens at the time that they want it to happen. And I'll give you an example. So let's say, and this is my belief, let's say you have a female, and I'm gonna do a woman and a male perspective on this. If you have a female who knows she wants to get married by a certain age, again, let's just say she wants to be married by 30 and she's 28, right? About to be 29. What she would do is the next man she meets, she's going to treat him like a husband. She's not going to have a conversation saying, hey, I want to be married by the time I'm 30. What she's going to do is she's going to put the press on him by doing all these great things that she believes most men look for in a wife, therefore to push him into marriage at a faster pace based on her actions of acting like a wife.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then when that time comes at 30, it's, so when are we going to talk about marriage? You know, we've been together for 2.5 years or 2 years or whatever that time period is. You know, I've been treating you really well. When are you going to propose to me? Because when that TikTok comes, when it's about to run out, now it's kind of like, I don't understand. I've done everything that I think I need to do for this to happen at the time I want it to happen. Why isn't he responding in this time period that I think he should be responding in?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So again, the conversation isn't had, but the manipulation of action kind of tries to force it to happen during the time period. And men do the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Guys, so let's say you have a guy. There's a thing with some guys where they want to have kids by a certain age. They want to say, hey, you know, I want to have a kid by the time I'm 25, per se. Right? So he meets a young lady. He's 24. He knows he wants a kid by 25. Again, he will manipulate her into believing that he's the man of her dreams so that she will bear his children by the time he's 25. Even if he has no intention of marrying her, even if he has no intention of staying with her, his goal is to have kids by the time he's a certain age. And there are men who do that. There's a lot of guys out here with a lot of kids only because they wanted to have kids at a certain age or before a certain age.
We know Nick Cannon want a whole lot of kids, right?
Right. But
Nick, I mean, ask no questions. Nick going straight in.
You know what I mean? And I can't say people aren't having that conversation, but I really don't think it's happening as much as it probably should happen for those people that do have a clock, right? And we all have clocks. I mean, like I have a clock. I'm a certain age. I know for me, I'm not having no more kids because of how old I am. I don't want to have kids past a certain age. I've reached that age point. I don't want any more kids. That's a clock.
Right.
Yeah. So it's natural to have a clock. I think what's unnatural about it is, again, when you put it on someone else to fit in your personal clock when it requires someone else to participate in it.
Yeah. And you know, for me, I challenge everybody out there to have that conversation, to at least have a discussion about that clock, have a discussion about your future goals with your lady and vice versa to ladies for your man, and understand that and respect it, because once again, you can't change the other person's clock. And if you try to manipulate the situation or manipulate the actual perspective to get to your goal, most likely it's gonna end up not being what you expect it to be. So I definitely think that being transparent and having that conversation with the person would at least help. I'm not going to say it's going to change the result, but it would at least help. And people need to be mindful. So fellas, I definitely want you to understand you need to be able to identify when you're on the clock, because the ladies might not be telling you. You might be, just going through the motions, dating a nice lady, and she may have you on the clock. She may want you to be able to do certain things by a certain time, whether it's coming over, fixing a car, whether it's paying bills, whether it's moving in, having a child, a year down the road, 2 years down the road, wanting to be engaged. All women are very detailed, all the way down to what kind of ring she wants when she gets married. A woman will let you know all the things and all the signs on whether or not you're on the clock, because she's going to give you everything you need as far as the tools to achieve those goals on that clock.
That's right.
If she want her lawnmower, if she want her lawn cut, she'll buy you a lawnmower. If she want a ring, she gonna tell you what kind of diamond she like. It's simple. If she want an iPhone, she gonna tell you what kind of iPhone she like. Whatever a woman will give you is gonna let you know specifically what she wants, because she's going to provide you with all the information. That's how you know you're on the clock. You know, on a lot of different levels. You know, she will tell you without telling you that you're on the clock.
Yeah, so, yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Yeah,
and I'll say to the marriage thing, I think that scares guys away. And I'm gonna tell you why. If for me, if I were to meet someone, and before I believe you know me very well, we have a conversation, and you say, "Hey, I want to be married in the next 2 years." You're not even basing that off of me.
Yeah.
Right. Like, you didn't say you wanted to marry me in 2 years. You just said you want to be married. So that's gonna push me away out the gate, because you're not even looking at me for being me. You just
focus on the idea.
Yeah, you filling me into a spot on the roster that you just want to be filled to cross a goal off your list.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
You know, and I think that's the part that having that candid conversation where that, like, I can't see that going well. Like, I can't see meeting someone, two people meeting, and someone saying, "Hey, by the way, I know we just met. It's only been a month, but I want to have kids within the next year."
Right.
I just, I don't know. I don't see that going well most of the time.
I tell you, man, people nowadays are very strategic. When they first meet a person, they've already figured out within a few weeks of time whether or not this person can be a candidate to be a husband, a wife, even a parent, which I think is not a value or impactful conclusion that you should make about somebody within 2 weeks or a month or even a few months. It takes a lot of research to understand the history of a person, and also you need to understand what kind of family comes along with that, because of course, everyone knows when you marry, you just don't marry that person, you marry that family as well. You need to understand all the dynamics before you make a decision like that. But the main thing for me, the main thing for me, for men and women, it needs to be organic. If it's not organic, it's just not going to work. It's just not going to work. If the man doesn't want to step up and do the things that he needs to do, then the lady shouldn't want it anyway.
Right.
I mean, it's just that simple. I mean, a lot of times these things, a lot of these subjects and these topics, they should happen organically. It shouldn't be a conversation where you're having a conversation with me about these type of things, unless I'm coming to you asking you because I can see myself in the future doing those things. And I just want to get some insight on what you like, colors you like, or places you've never been, what's on your bucket list for things you want to do. I'm already asking these things because these are things that I want to do for you. So ladies, please let men be organic. Not to say that you can't be transparent and let them know what your goals are, but again, those goals really have nothing to do with him. If he decides to move forward and go forward, that's great, but let it be organic. That's my main thing.
Yeah, 100%. And definitely what we're not saying is to not tell people what you want.
Right.
Like, when you first meet people, man, it's absolutely fair to say, "Hey, I want kids. Hey, I want to be married. I want to live in a house, not an apartment. This is the kind of car I want. I can see myself driving, me and my spouse." Like, whatever it is you have in your mind about your house and picket fence, whatever that looks like in your head, it's okay to talk about those things, but it's putting the timestamp on them is what is problematic. There's nothing wrong with saying, "I want to be married with kids." That's great. Maybe he does too. But when you say, "I want to be married with kids within the next year and a half," now
I hear people say it all the time.
You done made it a little odd now, because I don't know in a year and a half if I'm even like you anymore. Not alone marry and have kids. Like, that's a lifetime commitment. Marriage is supposed to be a lifetime commitment.
Right.
We all know that it isn't, because you can get separated and divorced. Right. Marriage is supposed to be but children are a lifetime commitment tied with a person. There is no other lifetime commitment like children, or unless you sign a document with both of y'all names on it and your partners in some financial, where you got to go to a court of law to get your names off of it, like putting both of your names on the house or something crazy like that. But I mean, deciding to be committed to someone for a lifetime within a year is a big decision for someone to make.
I agree. It's definitely something that people need to understand. And like you said, putting the timestamp and putting that pressure on someone else is something that you shouldn't do. We definitely don't recommend it, because most times it's not going to end well. And I think another key important thing about this is that we have different languages when we have these conversations. So someone may say, well, I thought you this is what you wanted. And then somebody else may respond and say, no, that's not what I wanted. I said specifically I want this. So men and women have to understand that when a man says something, a woman will take what you say and not actually take what you say. They'll take what you say and make and give an opinion about it and have a conclusion about it and translate it and say, hey, this is what you meant. And then for a guy, if a woman says something, she may have that same concept, but he may take it for what she's actually saying. We're very different when we communicate. So that's something you definitely want to keep in mind when you're having a conversation with somebody about your goals, about what you want in the future, about if you want to be in a monogamous situation, or if you want to be out here dating. I think a lot of times the communication gets all out of whack, and that can be a whole nother show, just the communication aspect of men and women, which I think definitely needs to be addressed. I mean, we've talked about it on a few different shows as far as what women want and what men want.
Right.
But that communication piece is very important when trying to understand and recognize whether or not you're on the clock, whether or not you about to get up out of here, or whether or not somebody's putting you on the clock because they're saying, hey, I want to do these things. And if you're going to be with me, then you're going to need to learn how to be my husband or my wife. You're going to need to understand that I want children in the next few years. These things need to be understood through the communication piece. So I think that's critical.
This other piece of this that I'll say, because I think this absolutely applies.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin Samuels said this particular phrase, right?
You said his name.
Right. Yeah. and again, I don't agree with everything he said or how he said it, but this particular thing definitely applies to this regarding putting people on the clock of what you want and when you want it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Men, you have to understand that women control the access to sex and childbearing. You have no control over that. I don't care what your clock is, what your time period is. Women have control over sex and control over bearing children. So if she wants you to wait 3 months, 4 months, 2 years, 5 years, no matter what that time is, she has 100% complete control over that. That's what men have to understand. The other side of that, what women have to understand is that men have complete control over relationships. Because men propose to women. Men decide that I'm going to propose to you and make you my wife. Right? Men decide that we're going to be in a committed relationship.
I agree.
Men have the power of relationships. Women have the power of sex and childbearing. And when you understand that, again, this isn't me saying, this is something that this guy said that I just was like, wow, okay, that's completely true, and I agree with it, and I think it applies to this when we're talking about putting people on the clock. You can't put somebody on the clock that you have no control of.
Right.
Like women, you cannot make a man marry you if he doesn't want to marry you.
Right.
And guys, you cannot make a woman have sex with you or bear your children if she doesn't want to.
If she doesn't want to. That's right.
There's nothing you can do.
That's right. That's right. And when you put it that way, that really, when you step back and think about that and try to apply it to those communication barriers that men and women have, it really makes it really simple. I mean, it really simplifies what you have control over and what you don't have control over.
That's right.
And a lot of how we talk as men represents that when it comes to relationships, whether or not we want to be in a relationship or not, and also whether or not we want to be married or not. That ties into that statement. And then, like you said, childbearing and also sex are decisions that women control and have always controlled and will always control.
Right.
So when you have that perception, when you have that mindset of that, you kind of understand, okay, so let me just focus on what I can control and what I want in regards to whether or not I want to be in a monogamous situation or whether or not I don't want to be in a monogamous situation. Because in turn, the woman's going to decide whether or not she's going to have sex with you or whether or not she's going to bear her children with you.
That's right.
In reaction to your decision making on whether or not you want to be in a relationship or be married.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah, man.
Makes sense. You know, a big sign, if you are out here playing games and she brings you home to meet the whole family and you out here playing games, you better know you on the clock.
You definitely on the clock.
Because a woman will not bring you to her family and mother and father and brothers and sisters if she didn't think you were worth something more than just a date.
Mm-hmm.
She's looking at you as a lifetime partner. So if you don't have those lifetime characteristics, then you need to have a conversation.
Right.
ASAP.
Yeah. Look, and we're not talking about being invited to the cookout. You know,
right.
Or hey, you know, my uncle having a cookout. Won't you come with me to the cookout? We're not talking about that.
No, we talking about dinner.
We talking about dinner. Like it's just her, you, and her family.
Yeah.
Like in a more intimate setting amongst her family, right? When you get there, then that's a wake up call.
That's a wake up call. You need to understand that this is serious. And like I said, we're not saying that men don't deserve to be in those positions, but if you're not ready to commit on that level, if you're not ready to give that same energy and that same output, then you need to have that conversation. Yeah, because you on the clock. On the clock.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I wanted to go into the other side of being on the clock.
Okay.
Like I was talking about earlier in that episode about knowing, looking at the clock as far as knowing when your time is about to run out in the relationship. The things that might happen when the person you're with has put you on the clock of saying, hey, I'm about to be done with you if you don't get your stuff together, and some signs of what it looks like. Because, nobody just wakes up and breaks up with people. There's always subtle things that happen where people change and people do, again, passive aggressive things or really obvious things to let you know that they leaning towards not fooling with you no more.
Well, that's what I was going to say. You can find sometimes where people will be brutally honest because they no longer care about the results. Right. See, people lie sometimes because they want to they're protecting the other person's feelings.
Right.
Or they won't give you everything because they're protecting the other person's feelings. But when you have somebody who's brutally honest, that could mean, I'm not saying it always means this, but it could mean that they don't really care which direction the results go in because they're done already anyway. So they can be brutally honest about whatever it is they're doing or whatever it is they're not doing. So yeah.
And honestly, for the people out there, you would hope you're dealing with a honest person because that makes it easy.
Yes,
that makes it so much easier where you don't have to crack a code and have a lot of unnecessary conversations about expectations and you're not doing this and you're not doing what's wrong. Nothing's wrong. Just cut to the chase And,
Yep.
it's probably going to hurt a little bit more. And it's probably going to challenge, your feelings and all those kind of things a little bit more, but you'll be better off
in the long run.
In the end, right? Dealing with a person who was very honest with you about their intentions and their feelings. So yeah, I got a couple things. I gave 2 earlier already. I'll say the decrease in intimacy is kind of an obvious one. And I'll caveat that with, it depends on what your intimacy level is on a regular basis.
Yeah. Especially for men, unless there's a health issue on either end, really, women and men, as you get older, that people have, health issues that they may have to deal with. But especially for a man, I think most women understand that if he's not being intimate with you for long periods of time, then you may be on the clock.
You might be on the clock, right? And by intimacy, it doesn't necessarily mean it has to involve actual intercourse. It could be him touching on you, him rubbing on you, him, coming up behind you while you're doing dishes and touching your hips, or kissing you, or looking at you a certain way, maybe saying little dirty things to you in your ear. Like like it's a lot of things that can lean to the intimacy side that men do. But if he stops doing that, you need to pay attention.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think that you can apply that logic to all levels of the relationship when it comes to affection.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Affection is a really good one. That's another side of that. I think intimacy and affection are kind of 2 different things, but still in that same care, that same lane. Small things like if you sneeze and they don't say bless you. They used to say bless you. I tell you, that's a very small thing.
Or
thank you. Yeah, little things.
The little things, yeah. When those things go away, you definitely need to pay attention, because you may be on the clock. And we're not telling you to go out here and make assumptions.
Right.
Because I'm big on not making assumptions. You don't want to make assumptions. You don't want to. You want to find out if you're on the clock, is what we say.
You got to look at the whole picture. Look at the whole picture, not just these few things that we're going to talk about.
We all have bad days. Right. We all have bad days. I have a bad day where I may not be as affectionate as I was throughout the week or last month or the month before. We all have bad days, so I'm sure, ladies and gentlemen, y'all all have bad days as well. But there should be some consistency, like Dub spoke about before in the show before. You should see some consistency when it comes to intimacy and when it comes to affection, because if you don't, you might be on the clock.
I would say the next one is if your man increases or starts being slightly disrespectful to you.
Ooh, that's a good one.
When your man just suddenly becomes a little more disrespectful, whether he was disrespectful before or not, but if just little things, if he's
he shouldn't be at all.
He shouldn't be at all. But if he's become a little disrespectful to you, that's a sign for you to know that you might be on the clock with him,
because his patience is gone.
And I'm gonna talk about from a man's perspective, because yes, I have an assumption about what women would do when they put men on the clock, but what I don't want to do is assume that I know all those things, because obviously I'm not a woman.
Right. And maybe we need to have a woman on the show to tell us.
Yeah. I think that would be the best thing. I think an obvious one for the ladies, if your man starts hanging out with his boys a lot more than he used to, again, the holistic, not, don't make a judgment call on this, but if he really starts hanging out a lot more than he normally does, that might be a sign. If he starts paying a lot more attention to his hygiene habits, or what he's wearing and how he's looking, like, not saying he shouldn't be doing that already, but if it gets real extra for kind of no reason at all, you might be on the clock.
You might be on the clock. I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. Like I said, we don't want to make people make assumptions, but again, the consistency should apply to all of these things.
Right.
When it comes to these type of things, that if they're having a bad day, or maybe it's a special event where somebody got to go out and do whatever, but you should already know those things.
Right.
These are things that are just random and have no history behind it, and it consistently comes about. You should be concerned and have that conversation. So I agree.
Another one I got is his social media presence with you. So if you have a man who normally posts pictures with you on his social media, or he tags you in things in social media, and then that kind of stops, he kind of no longer puts you in his social media, he stops tagging you in things, that could be a sign.
That's a big one.
If that's something he normally does.
Right.
If it's not something he does, then it's not a big deal. But if he normally has a really healthy social media presence with you on his social media outlets, and then that kind of goes away, you should pay attention to that.
Yep. And I got a question, Doug, now that I'm thinking about it. So if somebody finds out that they on a clock, I want people to understand that that doesn't necessarily mean that it could be per se somebody else. It could be that person has just moved on from you in that situation. Because on the clock doesn't necessarily mean that they're quote unquote cheating, because we can get into the definition of cheating, and we might even have a show about that, what the definition of cheating is.
Right.
But I think that people need to understand that sometimes people just make a decision to say they're in the process of moving on, and these are some of the things that you need to see, that you'll see that people do when they're trying to move on from the relationship or the situation that they're in. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're quote unquote cheating.
Right.
But they are definitely trying to remove themselves from the relationship.
And I also think these things, to kind of piggyback off of that, I kind of also think these things may not even lead to the person thinking about leaving you. They just may not know how to have these conversations about their unhappiness. And
very true. It may not even want to leave. Yeah,
you know what I mean? They just kind of acting out because they want you to pay attention to something and respond to something to kind of start a conversation that they don't know how to start. And they could be using these actions of displeasure to maybe make you start the conversation because they don't know how, or they're uncomfortable with having, those I'm not happy conversations. Right.
And it could be just being on the clock just for that, because they don't want to address the elephant in the room.
Right.
They don't know how to address that. So they're saying, okay, I'm going to put you on the clock because I'm unhappy about this particular thing, but I really don't want to address it.
Right. But I'm going to do all this passive aggressive stuff around you to let you know that I have a problem with something, but I'm not going to tell you that I have a problem with something until you ask me about all these other little things I'm doing. Then it'll come out.
Right. And that's a good point too. Like the passive aggressive, just anybody that's being short with you and you know they're normally not short with you, that's a telltale sign right away.
Yeah, it
Phone, callbacks, communication, spending time. Anybody that's just out the blue just becomes short with you, you know that there's something that happened. Mm-hmm. Something happened, something was done, and that's something that you need to be paying attention.
Another thing I got for you is when a man no longer cares about pleasing you anymore, whether that's sexually, whether that's mentally, whether that's, economically. When a man no longer cares about taking care of you anymore, or that effort has gone down. And again, all these aren't exact signs that lead up to guys having problems, but they could. And they're worth asking a question. If you notice these little things, it's worth having these conversations, because when you don't, what we do, what men do, we then believe like, oh, you're not even paying me attention to see that I'm changing. When a man changes his behavior with you and you don't address it, even if you see it, if you don't address it, for us, we're looking at it as, oh, you're really not paying me no attention because I've pulled back and you don't seem to see it.
So then people make assumptions and they start to resent the other person. That's a great point. Yeah, I couldn't have said that one better. That's a good point right there. So
and it's a lot of signs,
yeah,
that you might be on the clock. I mean, and I know I said I wasn't going to comment on the lady side of it, but honestly, I think I think some of these things can go on their side too, on some of the things that women may do.
I think the ladies may have a much longer list because I think ladies have that clock when it comes to noticing these things much faster than men. I think women have a tendency to notice a change in a man much faster than a man has a tendency to notice a change in a woman. Most times when men notice a change, it's so far late and over with. The woman has already moved on to the next thing.
That's a good point.
A woman will, a significant small detail I'm talking about from babe to baby.
Right.
I'm talking about that significant. A woman will raise her eyebrow and say, wait a minute, what changed? You know what I mean? What's the difference? Why are you using this term versus that term? And for a man, it may be just absolutely nothing. There's a lot of times women got to understand a lot of times with men that there is no math behind it. It's just we are just different creatures when it comes to things that we express, things that we say, things that we do. Sometimes it really is no science behind it. But I think a lot of times women think that there's a science behind it. There's a reason why you changed up instead of you parking on the left side. Now you parking on the right. Sometimes there is no science behind it, but this is about you being able to recognize when you're on the clock. So this is about you being able to talk about those things. So we'll have a show we'll have a show later on about those specific things. And I think that goes back to communication as well. But again, I think women have a much more detailed list of being able to talk about when you're on the clock and being able to identify simple things like that. Babe to baby is something, that's, and I've been questioned like that before.
Well, I think you're 100% right. I think just because women are far more in tune with what's going on emotionally in relationships than men are, and some of these types of things can be challenged on the daily.
Yes.
If you have a thing, if you're married and you have a thing where you kiss your wife goodnight every night and you say I love you, and you don't do it one night, she might ask you, you didn't kiss me and tell me you love me last night. Yeah. And you could have been doing that every night for 3 years, and that one night you didn't do it. She may ask, hey, what's going on?
She may do more than that. Because I'm sure in those 3 years y'all have had problems, but you still ended the night off with a kiss.
You're right, man. And women don't let those things go on for very long periods of time.
No. So I think this show probably will help the fellas more so than the women. I think the women already know.
It absolutely could. Maybe subliminally, I'm talking to the fellas, but acting like I'm talking to the ladies.
Right. Because the ladies already got it, man. They on point when it comes to identifying these things, because naturally I think this is what they do. They pick up on these things because, again, they have a much more in tune sense of what's going on in nature, period, so.
Yeah, I don't have any more on my list. That's all I got. Those were on the clocks that I got that I hope make sense. And I hope you listeners out there understand where we was coming from with this. So don't take each of these and then approach your significant other and, and have these conversations because they may have done one or two of these things. It doesn't necessarily mean that they've put you on the clock. But it's worth the conversation. It's nothing wrong with asking questions and having conversations. There's no such thing as a bad conversation.
Yep, you may find out something that you didn't know, and ultimately whether it's good or bad. Point is, you now know, because you don't want to waste any more time if somebody's moving on or if somebody's unhappy. You want to spend that time on fixing the problem addressing a problem, or moving on from a situation if you need to move on from a situation. But again, we hoping these are things that are just really issues that people don't really know how to address, and they act out in certain ways, and they put people on this clock, from what Dub was speaking about.
Yeah. So hey, again, we appreciate y'all support. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Again, www.dubandtrey.com. Follow us on Facebook, IG, Twitter. I think we on TikTok now.
We definitely on TikTok.
Right? We got a TikTok that we working on. I think it's live. So follow us, find us on TikTok. All of it's always at Dub and Trey. No matter the platform, look for Dub and Trey and you're gonna find us. So we appreciate y'all. We out.
We out, man. Thank you again.